for thank you very much for joining us for the launch for Marian Womack's second novel, The Swimmers. There we have it. There we have the beautiful cover. So we've got about an hour. We're going to be doing some readings. There's also going to be some book talk and discussion between Marian and myself, as well as some special guests, shall I say, in the form of questions from people who have read the book. I'm G.V. Anderson. I'm your host. I'm a writer myself. You can find my work in tor.com and fantasy and science fiction, places like that. But I am not the main star today. It's Marian's night. We do have the chat room available for you to use. Please make use of it. Ask questions there, and our stage manager Anne will be feeding those to me so that if we have time to answer your questions, we will do. So Marian, how are you?
Very, very relieved. I'm very happy to be here because, you know, I didn't know if I was going to be able to do a launch at all. Mm-hmm. The Golden Key was published 2 weeks before the first lockdown, basically. So the pandemic crept on us and I couldn't have any events or anything. So it's really, really nice to be here and do something. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really glad that we're going to be able to celebrate the launch, even though we can't actually physically be anywhere. My sort of vision for the night was cocktails. So I don't have a cocktail, it's non-alcoholic, but I have my drink. And I know you're sipping something as well.
Yeah, I'm actually sipping something very Andalusian tonight in honor of the swimmers.
Yeah, very on brand. So for anyone who's joining us who isn't familiar with the swimmers, with the story just yet, I'm just going to very quickly do a rundown of the blurb, what the story's about. And after that, we're hopefully going to have a reading. So here is what the swimmers is about. After the ravages of the green winter, Earth is a place of deep jungles and monstrous animals. The last of the human race is divided into surface dwellers and the people who live in the upper settlement, a ring perched at the edge of the Earth's atmosphere. Bearing witness to this divided planet is Pearl, a young techie with a thread of Shivani blood who lives in the isolated forests of Gabari, navigating her mad mother and the strange blue light in the sky. But Pearl's stepfather promises her to a starborn called Arlo, and the world Pearl thought she knew will never be the same again. Set in the luscious landscape of Andalusia, this claustrophobic dystopian reimagining of wide Sargasso Sea is a fever dream, a blazing vision of self-destruction and transformation. And if that doesn't want to make you go and buy it, I don't know what will. So Marian, would you mind treating us to a short reading to kick the evening off?
My pleasure. So this is a little reading, which I hope it shows how I use place and my sense of place in the novel. I was looking into the eyes of the bright ocean, the monstrous seagulls wailing above me. If I look up, I saw nothing, so blindly the white light was. The swimmer traveled methodically, moving away from me. His movements looked precise, automatic. Every couple of strokes, his black mouth came out for air. He was moving away from me, away from the rock, where I sat perched like a little bird. Was that the day that I cut my feet on the rock? The scenes from that outing appeared in my mind mixed up with those from another, one that included mother and my little brother. Their figures appear and disappear from the shore as the memories intertwine. I remember the sharp pain and the thin red ribbons of blood in the clear water. Did I know the swimmer? The swimmer was my father. Yes, but did I know him? I was perched on a rock at the pointy end of the shell-like coquina stone. To my left, the swimmer. To my right, the coast stretched for 50 kilometers, curving out on a bay, delicate little shores, abrupt rock formations. At the very end of the curve, the isthmus of Old Town. If I followed the curve of the coast with my eyes, I could see them, sitting at the end, the two vessels. It was not a clear image, not really. It flickered in and out of my vision, like a mirage. Masses of rock, the town at the point, the isthmus, and at the very end, the two gigantic structures. All odd, all hazy, as though I was peering at them through a glass vase or deep water. It was the rising heat that made them look like the ghosts of two mountains, pale and almost translucent. The vessels sat quietly there, at the end of the known world, abandoned on the state, the British skeletons of two enormous beetles. The old white marble cathedral, now the registry, looked dwarfish at their feet. Their vastness imposed itself on everything, producing a kind of vertigo in the onlooker. I imagined them taking flight as they once did, higher and higher, a heavy cloud crossing the blue sky, upwards, always upwards. I looked at the vessels, stared at them. My father continued taking his exercise, perhaps doing something more sinister. Was he planning to give himself to the three oceans? Was he planning to leave me behind? Where I sat on the Coquina Rock, 50 kilometers separated me from the vessels, 50 kilometers of yellow sand, darker stone, a flat sea that lapped delicately at the shore. The water was the bluest thing I had ever seen, coming and going, a calm receding tide, leaving behind a shining mirror of darker sand. So pure, so constant, the water on this side of the wall. I wish that this water might wash everything. I wish it could wash me. I wish for my mother and my brother. To my left, the swimmer. Even now, I have no words to describe him. I can't say he moved gracefully, or that his huge body splashed water bluntly over the surface as he advanced. I didn't really know my father. I guess I must have known him at some point, but I don't anymore, not really. He was soon going to be out of our lives. Was he a good swimmer, a bad swimmer, a believer in giving yourself to the three oceans? All I remember is that I sat, perched on a rock. To my left, a swimmer, to my right, a little beanie girl, her hair dyed blue, and a smile of happiness on her face. There was blood that day. My feet got cut on the stone. Its porous edges alive with seashells, little barnacles, the pointy soft skeletons of centuries-old dead crabs. I look at the red ribbon escaping from my skin, little rubies, red pearls, if such a thing could ever exist. And I cried. Two forces pulling at each other from opposite places. I was meant to be there. I was not meant to be there. There had been an urgency, my father's taking me out of bed in the early hours, putting me inside the hovering vehicle, stealing my sleepy robe, wrapped up in a troubled blanket, wrapping me up like a little animal he had found on the road and needed to bring to life, urgently, in secret. Quiet, my little bird, he said, for that's what was he called me, his little bird, his little bluebird.
Thank you so much, Marian. I literally read that again yesterday and it gave me chills. It gave me chills.
Oh, thank you.
I reread just the very kind of opening, the first few chapters, just to prep for tonight, and I absolutely loved the red pearls, if such a thing could exist. I loved that, and just that whole opening was just gorgeous. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
So from there, we're going to jump into our first question from one of our good friends, Aaliyah Whiteley, who has very kindly offered up the question for Marian. For those of you who don't know Aaliyah, she's a wonderful, wonderful writer, science fiction. Mostly it's quite dark, it's quite literary, very surreal, and her most recent book, Skyward Inn, shared a lot of similarities with the swimmers, I thought. So I thought she would be the perfect choice to kick off our Q&A.
Hi, Marian. Congratulations on the publication of The Swimmers. I absolutely loved the book. I hope your launch party is going really well today. I wanted to ask you a quick question. The Swimmers has this great opening chapter, which mixes a very personal viewpoint with a really effective overview of what the novel's going to be about. In this case, an overview actually over the Earth itself. And I loved that choice. I'm really interested in seeing sort of huge world-changing events through that close subjective point of view when I write. And I think you do that so well. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you do that and why that approach appeals to you. Have a great night. Thanks.
Thank you, Ilya.
Thank you so much to Ilya for her words and for her question. And I'm surprised you liked the opening chapter, because it really is, it was such a mess until literally before publishing the book. But also equally was a chapter that perhaps benefited more from support from my supervisors, because for those who don't know, The Swimmers is a novel that I submitted as partial fulfillment of my PhD in creative writing. And I had two amazing supervisors. One was Ellen Marshall, and another one was Una McCormack. And we basically went through draft after draft after draft of the opening chapter, because I wasn't actually getting it right. So the problem that I was trying to solve with the structure that Aliyah has mentioned is basically that I was trying to do many things. I mean, you have to go back to 2016, years ago, and I had only been writing in English for a couple of years. And I had this, well, it's something that I still do now, which is I always try to cram so many ideas and so many things in not in one chapter, but even sometimes in one scene. And I really need somebody to say to me, stop now, there's enough ideas going around. And, you know, it's something that novice writers, I've already published a couple of books, so I still do a lot, trying to pack too much and trying to make like a microcosm of what the novel was going to be only within that chapter. So I'm glad that I got some success with it, but that was only because Ellen and Una were always basically telling me to find more strategies to ground the reader. Basically, what I was trying to do at some point was a Matryoshka effect, in which Pearl dives into her memories. And from one memory, she dives into another memory, and she dives into another memory. And it's also because obviously trauma is one of the themes of the novel. So there's things there that she's trying to get at and she can, etc. At some point that really wasn't working. It was too confusing for the reader. So the dual structure of having Pearl up in the ring in the present, looking over Earth, and then the past being the surface, made that cut much cleaner as it was. So it was like a cheeky strategy on my part to two different places, two different times, because basically what I was trying to do at the beginning, I wasn't getting it quite right, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. I think what really struck me in the opening, Marian, was the juxtaposition of the really gorgeous natural world that you describe on Earth versus the very clinical, technological ring environment that Pearl finds herself in. I really enjoyed that juxtaposition. I think that kind of set up the themes really well, I think.
And it also, both settings allow me to still talk about memories and have Pearl diving into her memories, because the role of hidden memories is so important in the novel, and how they also help at some point even to form Pearl's worldview, how she sees her world and her society. So that's certainly something that the novel is trying to do, which is getting at these memories and showing a bit how they inform the narratives we tell each other, we tell ourselves about ourselves, that define us. And I guess I'm also interested in the kind of narratives and memories and hidden memories of families, the kind of things that families perpetuate, like, for example, if they give you the tag of being a black sheep or something, and how hard it is to get out of those dynamics. So that kind of soup of memories and even dreams as well sometimes. Against the, like you said, the clinical ring, where no one seemed to, I don't know, have dreams or problems, or it's not that. It sounds wonderful. You don't have to blink.
You just get to stay in a bed pod all day.
Yes, wonderful.
Well, I think that talk about the structure of the opening, and also the idea of the Matryoshka doll, where Pearl is constantly, diving in. I mean, obviously that was from sort of an earlier draft that was maybe a bit too messy, but we still do get that feeling, definitely. Which brings me to my next question, which is very, very kindly offered to us by Kathleen Jennings, all the way in Australia. Kathleen is a wonderful artist and also the author of Fly Away, which came out last year, which is a beautiful, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's fairy tales, it's gothic, it's Australian outback, it's absolutely lovely. Anyway, Kathleen inhaled the swimmers in what I think must have been 2 days in order to ask these questions.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah. And she said she very much wishes that she could have been here, but unfortunately time zones can't be helped. But one of her questions particularly struck me, and I think it struck you a little bit as well, Marian, and that was, the novel washes back around itself like a sea or like water in a bowl. Was that a planned structure? Did it reflect the process? Emerge from the themes? And when you were speaking about how the first chapter, particularly, you want to keep going into deeper and deeper layers into the world and into Pearl as well. So did that come about organically, or was that something that you had in mind?
I think so. I hadn't thought about the structure sort of mimicking the ocean or movements of flow, but I think that's actually very perceptive. One of the things, and I'm going to repeat myself a lot, sorry, that I really wanted to convey with the novel was a sense of place for a particular stretch of coast, which is in the Atlantic bit of Andalusia, which is very small, between Conil and Cádiz, my hometown. Basically, when you grow up in an ocean community, you're very aware of the tides. The tides marks at points where you go to, where you work, your work. Certainly they mark your play when you're a child, and I obviously grew up in that community. Because what people don't realize sometimes is that the Mediterranean coast of Andalusia is very different from the Atlantic coast, in that the tides in the Mediterranean are very, very small, so the water moves very little. But in the Atlantic, we have huge winds. We have tides that are so big that they can mean the difference between having an eternal, extending, beautiful beach that goes on forever and having no beach, because the sea has the ocean has come all the way up to the town. So in my hometown, actually, people obsessively follow the tides, and the local newspaper even prints the times of the tides and all of that. So yeah, I think obviously, if I was gonna try to replicate or give a sense of place of that area, the ocean must have seeped into the structure with this flowing structure. But obviously, it's exactly what you're saying about the role of memory in a way, because dipping in memories is almost like dipping into the ocean, isn't it? In a way. So there's also a organic and a fluidity into going into the past in your mind, especially when you're trying to excavate something that you might not even know is there. And it's almost like the leap of faith that the swimmers do by jumping from the wall into the ocean. So there's certainly a parallel there. And I think thinking about it sort of replicates that rhythm. But funny enough, I can't really say it was something that I set out to do. So this is, I mean, really, really interesting reading of it. And yeah, good one.
I know. Thank you, Kathleen. Yeah, I really, when I read that question, it wasn't something that had come to mind until I read the first sort of chapters again. I was like, yeah, it does kind of wash back over itself, and you know, it's kind of like you know, it recedes and leaves the dark sand, but then the theme comes back again, or a certain image comes back again. The one that struck me, as I said, the red pearls, the cut of the foot, that kind of comes back as an image a few times, which is really cool. Kathleen did have one other question for us, which I think is a little bit more of a complex question. So she was intrigued by the ambivalent approach the book seems to take towards storytelling.
Okay.
On the one hand, you've got that gorgeous sensory immersion in the writing itself, versus the excess of the registry is framed as something that is bad. The responsibility for telling history versus the responsibility for holding history, particularly with the registry, I thought was really interesting. And people being told what to think versus people needing to be told the truth. Kathleen says, to what extent do you see the risks and responsibilities reflected in storytelling? And do you think there are current dangers in mutating methods of transmitting stories? It's a huge question.
But I've got a very simple answer.
Go for it. Go for
it. I don't want to get like overly political or anything, but I think 100%, absolutely 100%, that writers of fiction, writers of non-fiction, poets, and in fact all artists, we have a huge responsibility, and now more than ever, not just for the stories we choose to tell, but how we choose to tell them. And can I give you a quick example from my life that was an absolute turning point for me? Back in the innocent days of 2011, 2012,
I can barely remember them.
Prehistory. Something happened when I was living in Madrid, in my country, for a few years, and something happened while I was there, and it's that the prime minister of my country, Marian was then the prime minister, knowingly lied in parliament, and it was the first time that this happened. And I was so shocked by this. I was so absolutely shocked. I even wrote a piece about it for the New Internationalist, which went viral, which is the only time this has happened to me. But I was in absolute shock. But my shock wasn't only about the fact that the prime minister had lied into parliament. My shock was that came from the fact that nothing absolutely happened to him. He didn't have to resign. To me, that was a turning point. To me, that was a shift. 5 good years before Trump even. And also at that time, my first son was born, Oliver. So I don't know, there was this sense that it was almost my duty to keep an eye on things, to call out things that were wrong or that were lies, that I had to preserve truth for him. Because if you think about it, my children are gonna grow in a world in which we basically don't value truth anymore. Truth is completely devalued. People pick and choose the stories they want to believe, and they run along with them, and the social media bubbles reinforce this. I mean, like I said, I don't want to get very political, but if you think about it, there's a group of people in the world, thousands of people, who honestly believe, for example, that Hillary Clinton ran a pedophile ring out of a pizza parlor. And I don't know personally any of them, but I'm sure that people like me, I'm sure they have families and they care about their families and they have normal jobs and they go about the day and they're normal people. So that really, I find this incredibly worrying and incredibly terrifying. So I certainly, it is quite clear to me that I'm doing some kind of advocacy for certain topics with my writing. And I don't mind saying it openly like this, and I don't mind, but I definitely write to send a message out into the world. Absolutely. I've got something to say, which is the two themes I'm interested in, and I write about that. And yeah.
No, I think that I definitely feel that your fiction comes across with that. And that gives us a really good segue into a question that I had for you, and that actually Anne Charnock has very kindly submitted to us. Hello, Anne, I can see you going, what, me? Has very kindly submitted to us via the chat. And that is the recurring theme of nature, ecology in your fiction. You explored this quite a bit in your short story collection, Lost Objects, which was nominated for a BFA. And it comes out again in The Swimmers, the natural world and our place in it, what we owe it, especially. And in The Swimmers, nature has turned wild, it's turned weird, it's become unknowable again in a way that it wasn't before. And the swimmers, of course, are the people who swim out to sea as a kind of protest, a penance for what we've done to the world. What draws you to telling these kinds of stories? Because it's obviously a theme that you kind of come back to. It's something that I presume you're quite passionate about. And can these stories be hopeful? I mean, where we are at the moment with, where we are with environmental protests and, where we are with the world, can those stories have hope?
Well, why am I drawn to this kind of stories? I have to go. I have to mention again when my son was born. When my son was born, I have been actually struggling with writing. I had published a novel in Spain, but I was still struggling to find themes and issues that I really wanted, like you say, feel passionate about in a way. And certainly having my first son was a turning point. I perhaps because I was a bit depressed after the pregnancy and giving him the birth and so on. And I started getting even anxiety when I thought about the world, about the natural world and so on. And I wrote my most successful short story ever, the short story that got me into Clarion, that was in the year's Best Weird Fiction, which is Orange Dogs, and it's about a post-apocalyptic flooding world where people still try to go around and do the things, have lives and have children and barter in the market and get food and so on, but after suffering those struggles. And I was just constantly thinking about the kind of world I was gonna leave to him. And now he has a sister, Anita, so it's both of them, Oliver and Anita. Which world am I leaving for my children? And this is basically the thing that I struggle with the most. And that is, the most important topic for me. And obviously that intersects with lots of other things like social injustice, inequalities. We were a family who moved to Spain years ago because we had been living in the UK for, I don't know, I had been here for 13 years, and the gap between the poor and the rich was getting wider and wider. So we moved to Spain, escaping from that, because I remember I had this dreamy, fantasy, nostalgic idea of my childhood in Andalusia, of my dad worked in a factory, basically. And I went to a private school, I went to university, there was not so much class division there. You could do things, you could have a good life. I ate very well. I went on little holidays. So we went there looking for that. But Spain changed as well. The whole world now is become, I don't know, caught up in the new reality we're in the new post-truth, or however you want to call it. We came back here because we couldn't really make a living in Spain, so now we have jobs here. But anyway, always moving and always wondering what is best for them. And for example, my great goal in life is to move to Scotland because I want to leave my children with a house that is more in the north than we are now. Yeah. We are in East Anglia, and even in East Anglia, last year we had 5 heat waves in East Anglia. And we had to sleep downstairs because we couldn't sleep in our bedrooms. It was so hot. It was impossible. Yeah. And big loans we live in Cambridge, and big loans from colleges, were burned, and where you can really see that a shift is not coming, it's here already. Yeah. So I'm constantly thinking, what can I do for them in that sense? And one thing is relocating the family to a more northern place, hopefully in the next few years we manage to do that. Sorry, this is not the question I told you ask me.
No, it's okay. It's the stream of consciousness and where it takes you. It's interesting. I mean, where I am, I'm on the coast, so we get all of that hot weather coming across from the Mediterranean, and it can be awful. Last year I think we got up to about 35 degrees for about a week. Wow. And obviously the houses here just aren't built for that kind of heat, so, and it's those kind of very immediate things. It's very easy to kind of turn your head off to plastic in the ocean because you don't see it all the time and things like this, but dealing with a heat wave and dealing with sea level rising, because I'm on the coast as well, so dealing with all of that. And we've just had these massive rock slides on the Jurassic coast, so there's quite a few buildings that are going down as well. That does kind of bring reality back to your doorstep in a way that it wouldn't otherwise.
No, exactly. You're absolutely right. And there's always been this big psychological dissonance between what we wanted to believe and what was happening. But now it's happening here. And there's been floodings in the UK for, many years. But whether these stories can be hopeful, this is an interesting question. I think maybe in Lost Objects, I left lots of the stories open. because I really like leaving stories open for people to maybe think a bit and not give all the answers, and maybe not being too gloomy or too positive, just to, but I have to admit that I really, really wanted to give a hopeful, happy ending to the swimmers, and I struggle massively with this. And at the end, the Guardian environmental section came to my rescue, and I don't want to give away the ending, but there's, I read about something that biologically might, help. But obviously, when I'm writing is fantasy. It's okay. I'll say it is not. It's a bacteria that eats plastic, and I read about it in the Guardian. But obviously, this bacteria only eats one type of plastic. You couldn't use it exactly to clean the oceans as a blanket treatment. So I'm extrapolating, I'm fantasizing a bit. But I'm leaving a glimpse of hope, a possibility. Maybe something can be done. I'm not a big believer in techno fixes. I think we have to fix other things. We can't just build a ring in the sky and just relocate. I don't know who will go live there. Kim Kardashian and people like that. Not us. We need to fix it here now somehow.
Agreed. Another question I had was, we've touched on it a little bit with regards to you having grew up in Andalusia and returning to Spain and seeing the changes that had occurred there as well. I wanted to ask you, why Andalusia? Why was Andalusia a setting for this novel? Because your first novel, The Golden Key, for anyone who hasn't seen that, was set in East Anglia, the Fens, and in Victorian London. And as a setting, that works incredibly well for that kind of atmosphere and mood. So what was it about Andalusia that gave you the atmosphere and mood that you were after for the swimmers? And did anything from what you'd seen in real life or experienced in real life feed into the societal system that was in Old Town, the techies and the beanies and that kind of thing? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, The Golden Key was set in the Fens, partly because it's where my political family is from. They're from Norfolk. And I am fascinated by the Fens, so I had to write about the Fens. I mean, it's an amazing place. It's an amazing landscape. It's so spooky, and I had to write about it. But I have always wanted to write about Andalusia for years and years and years. And I kept writing about other places. And I think that happens because there is a tension there. Andalusia at this point is two things for me. It's a real place, but it's also a space of the imagination that doesn't exist anymore. And I realized recently that I left when I was 23. So I haven't lived there since I was 23. And this year I'm 46. So I've exactly spent half my life away from it. And well, before the pandemic, I tried to go every year, either for Christmas or for a couple of weeks in the summer to see my parents. So obviously, I've got family there, so I try to go. That has changed now. But there is a sense, even when I miss Andalusia, that I'm missing a fantasy, and I'm very aware that I'm missing a fantasy. So I don't know, I was maybe trying to recapture some places, some space, some images from my childhood, or perhaps from my dream version of Andalusia. In certain sense, and don't want to get into a lot of detail about this, but I think that my response to Andalusia as a place is perhaps mediated by, I don't know, an amount of, I will say, perhaps traumatic experiences there. So it's both a place I love and a place that I don't want to go and live again, ever again. And I hope I have managed to convey that ambiguity in the novel as well.
I think so. I think it's both, described with such love and detail, but sometimes to an extent that it's almost verging on kind of ugly in its excess, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think I was using the novel also to process this tension in a way.
One other thing that I really wanted to touch on was the Gothic angle, because we're sort of calling this an eco-Gothic novel, and although the setting perhaps doesn't lend itself immediately to what we think of as Gothic, There's a lot of themes that it shares. It's got the mad mother, it's got the old country house, it's got the unreliable memory for the narrator, and it focuses a great deal on the women's sort of psychological story, the magic of Shivani, and that kind of thing. What draws you to the Gothic? Why do you like writing about the Gothic? And why do you think it works so well in different settings and contexts?
Oh, Gothic fiction. It's the absolute best. I basically didn't start writing weird fiction. I started writing Gothic fiction, and through the Gothic came to the weird. Because the weird, that's one thing that I really love that the Gothic doesn't quite do, which is to force your look on that you don't want to see. So that was the perfect thing to put on top of Gothic writing, that weird strategy. But I define myself as a Gothic writer, and I think that's what I am. And whether I'm writing about solving crimes in defense, or whether I'm writing about, this dystopian setting, I'm going to be writing Gothically. And I think that the reason is because, as most writers, I write mostly about my own experiences, my life, and the things that really interest me and worry me and preoccupy me, and the things that define who I am. So even if I'm writing about solving the mysteries in defense, I'm really writing about I don't know, not belonging, or looking at things from an outsider perspective. And that's certainly a theme in the novel that I want to write about. So I always am going to return to these topics. And if you think about it, I was actually born, I think, 3 months before Franco died. So in my country, in order to have a transition into democracy that was peaceful, what happened was that all the social actors sort of signed a pact of what was later called the Pact of Desmemoria. So it's not the pact of not remembering. It's the pact of it's the pact of not remembering. So basically, if you think about it, we hit all this trauma, 40 years of trauma. We never talk about it anymore. It was horrible, and this is the society in which I grew up. And that actually seep into families, if I think about it more locally, the 2 or 3 things that really define my family as it is, and what they stand for, and who they are, and so on, are 2 or 3 key events that no one talks about. So this is a very Andalusian thing. So I can't even say they're secrets, because they're things that people know in the community, but that no one ever mentions. And I'm sorry I can't give you an example, because I will be talking then publicly about something that maybe my father never mentions, But if I think about it, it's not surprising at all that I gravitated towards Gothic fiction, because obviously the Gothic is not a horror genre. It's a mode of writing that specializes in unveiling these hidden currents and these past traumas, etc. Which we say they're hidden, but actually they're seeping to the surface, and they're defining who we are in a way. So I don't know, Andalusia is very Gothic, and you wouldn't think about it as Gothic, because you think of Andalusia and you think of beaches and lots of sun and cocktails, or that kind of thing is what comes to mind, doesn't it? But in a way, because it's got all these people not talking about things and all the secrets, and it's even more disturbingly Gothic than if it had shadows and dark corners, and because it's in the open in a way. Sorry, is this making sense?
No, it's making perfect sense. And it was just reminding me of Kathleen's Flyaway again, because that kind of explores the Gothic in the very sunny, very warm Australian outback, very dry, like there's no fog, there's no, and I do like the idea of, the Gothic being the thing unsaid, that there's a secret, and it's not a big reveal, it's just a kind of a slow creep up through the narrative.
Yeah, and this is also one thing that I think why Sargasso spoke to me, because it was given a space to a Gothic narrative that is normally not a Gothic space, and that spoke to me massively. Yeah, so there's obviously a connection there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you next, I mean, about the inspirations, just quickly before we go on to our second reading. It's kind of been likened to a kind of a retelling of Wide Sog SOC. I myself saw a lot of annihilation in it. And Jill very helpfully has given us a question. I have to admit, my sister-in-law became interested in this book because of the beautiful cover. We started to read it right away and we both loved it. I absolutely love the idea of the evolved mutated animals and what is the message you want to convey with the animals, which kind of ties in with the thing of what was it about the inspirations and what did you want to convey with that?
Well, with what I want to convey first is certainly the idea that we as humans cannot find quick techno fixes for this, because if I don't want to give a lot away, but the terraforming that has been happening in the novel. Sorry, I gave it away right now. Oh no!
No, it's
oh
fine.
My God!
We'll edit that out in post.
Oh no! Anyway, most of things have been provoked down here, basically, by people up there, and certainly the mutations are a result of these. So I think certainly the message is don't trust in quick techno fixes, and let's do something that makes more sense on it. Yeah, sorry.
I think it was interesting as well. It's the one cast of people enforcing their will on another, sort of making them deal with these animals. That was what I took from it anyway.
Yes. And about where the hell came from inspiration-wise? Well, inspirations for the novel came from many places. I mean, some even from popular culture, because obviously the idea of a ring orbiting Earth is not new. So there's been lots of movies and books doing this. And it's difficult to write something really, really fresh and new, don't you think, these days? Everything has been... but certainly the gigantic hair, for example, that came from a dream. I do take loads from dreams, and even in my story, certainly in Lost Subjects happen, and here also happen in this novel. Sometimes I even have the characters narrating the dreams, and I sometimes have beta readers or editors saying that that's a shorthand for lazy. You don't put dreams. I love putting dreams and getting inspiration from dreams. And next to my bed, I do have that's my box of research, because I don't have a place where I write. So I carry it around, and it's got books and things. And it's got also one thing for writing in the night if I inspire, or if I dream of something. Oh, and a couple of days ago, Jeff Vandermeer gave this interview to The Guardian, and he said he takes things from dreams as well. So I felt so vindicated. So thank you very much. If that's it, is fine. But I think it's because in my case, being Spanish, and I'm sorry I always go back to Spain and being Spanish, but obviously it makes me who I am. And being Spanish, I've got this sense, this very strong sense that weird fiction is connected to surrealism. And my dreams are very surreal, so they really are a good source of amazing ideas, and certainly the hair came from it. But for example, if you think about it, the image of the sea clock with plastic, that's not made up. There's lots of pictures of that. So I think I take a lot of inspiration as well from the Guardian environmental section, which is this turning into dystopia in itself from the news around me. Last year, when the pandemic crept on us, my mother-in-law said to me, "Oh, this all looks like out of one of your short stories." And I've been for a whole year trying to process if I'm happy or not happy about about she saying that, because obviously, on the one hand, as speculative fiction writers, this is precisely what you write. You're almost, I don't know, it's a call to action.
Yeah.
But either because we're preaching to the already converted, or because you can't elicit real change, which is very sad. Or you are left with this in the position of saying, "Oh, I told you so," which obviously you don't want to do. Yeah, so I obviously the news, what I see in the news every day, and the topics and the themes I'm interested in exploring in my writing are getting uncomfortably close at the moment.
Mhm.
Really,
I found that
really,
was
more than ever.
I
You
found
found
that
that
with
too?
well with Lost Objects, because I read that year before last, I think, or I don't know time. What is time? But I read that, and it was there was a few things about that really struck me, that it didn't seem like science fiction anymore. It kind of, things had sort of catch up, and it'll be interesting. Well, not interesting. It'll be horrible, but it will be interesting to see in sort of 5-10 years time where we are with regards to the swimmers, and your vision of Andalusia in 2030 something.
Well, it's been predicted that by 2050, my hometown will be an island. Basically, it's if you look at a map in Cádiz, it's called Cádiz. It's a round thing, so an island, but it's got an isthmus that unites it with the mainland, and it's been like that for thousands of years. But it's already been predicted that the isthmus is going to disappear
Yeah.
in my children's lifetime, which I find very shocking. The interesting question is, which kind of science fiction or speculative fiction will be writing in 10 years' time?
Yeah.
When there's been lots of other, well, hopefully not, but other pandemics and perhaps already displaced people due to climate change. Well, they are already displaced people due to climate change.
Yeah.
But maybe massively more. And what are we going to be writing then?
Yeah. Yeah, I know, it's kind of scary to think that. That's why I write historical. I can look back to reflect on the future rather than trying to imagine what the future will be like. Got one more question from one of your mentors, and then we'll do your second reading of the evening, if that's okay, Marian.
Okay.
So the question is from Helen Marshall, and so oh no, sorry, I skipped. We're going to go do Una's first. This is Una McCormack, who was also one of your mentors. And her question was, can you talk a little bit about the pros and cons of creative writing PhDs?
Okay. Yes. So lots of good things and maybe things that didn't work so well for me. But I've already processed and realized the things that didn't work well for me, and I'm happy to pass on the wisdom of how you have to do creative writing PhD so it works for you. So I basically tried to do too many things. I got a grant to do it that covered my fees, so I brought my family here and got a full-time job. So I was doing the full-time PhD and the full-time job, and as a result, I got sick, I got ill, and it was really, really tough. And I didn't really make use so much of the community of the PhD, the community of like my fellow PhD students. I mean, I've met all of them. They're lovely. They're friends. We supported each other. But I didn't really make use so much of that community. Didn't build a network. So now I'm looking for creative writing jobs, and no one knows me anywhere. So if you want to do a PhD, the best way to do it is like my husband did: full funding, 3 years in the library.
Sounds
Just
good.
thinking about your PhD. And if you want to do it with 2 children, and well, I also got pregnant. And, yeah. Anyway, that's tough. That's tough, and you need to be mentally prepared for that.
Yeah.
Having said that, if you're a person who struggles with deadlines and you really need to be told when to stop, and that's something that has always happened to me, that I rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and I need somebody to say to me, stop, you don't write anymore, you don't need an 8th draft of this novel. It's excellent. It's excellent for that kind of thing, to have that kind of constant, really, really high level support, because lecturers are published writers and the people with careers who really know how to make you into a professional writer in a way. So I think I did become a professional writer in that line from Clarion, the master I did, and the PhD. And now I understand how this works. Whether I can pull it off and do it is completely different.
Yeah.
But I know what I should be doing.
Training wheels are off now.
Yes. 1 novel per year, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Marian. We're going to go into the second reading of the evening, and then we'll start winding up.
Okay, do we have time? Because this one is the slightly bigger one, or shall I cut?
Yeah, this one will probably take us up to the hour,
okay.
and then we're probably going to run over by about 10 minutes, just to let anybody know if they do need to go on and go anywhere. There'll be one more question after the reading, and then I'll sign off. So we shouldn't be doing too bad.
Okay. We are on the move. One wide corridor followed by another wide corridor, followed by another wide corridor. My life pod hovers over the floor, advances smoothly. The rocking motion could send me to sleep if I'm not careful. I would like to be awake. I need to be awake, fully aware of what they do to me. I wanted so badly to come up to the ring. It was what I had always wanted. This used to surprise my friends from the registry, especially Laurel. Aren't you scared to go up there? I thought you didn't like enclosed spaces, she would say. I would explain that the installations inside the ring were so extensive, filled with gardens and avenues and boulevards, storytelling theaters, public curated collections, sports installations. Inside, it was as big as 2 or 3 of our towns, more perhaps. It was impossible to feel trapped there. This was all second-hand knowledge, of course, from my stepfather. Now I am here inside a wide, vast chamber, oblong shape. The ceiling sends me back my own image with its metallic reflections. It reminds me of me, looking at my own reflection over the pond. At one end, there is an oval window. Through it, I can see one of the many green spaces here. There is hardly any furniture. My health issue life pod, some monitors hovering about it, moving around madly as they check on me. Far away, at the other end, a red sofa in front of the window. The system checks every morning, decides if it can open the glass lid for me to get up or not. So far, it has opened every morning. That means that she is healthy, doing well. Food appears in pouches at regular intervals, so does water. I am visited by the health professionals, or at least that's what I think they are, who talk among themselves and don't really share much of what is going on with me. But I catch their conversations and know that all is well. At least I imagine it, allow myself to imagine it. They are all wearing masks and plastic goggles and gloves and other protective gear, so I've never seen their faces, but I recognize them by their voices. And there is one who is obviously the leader, instructs the others, and the little drone machines that hover around me tells them what the next steps are. I cannot tell if they are wearing protective gear because they want to protect the baby or because they're protecting themselves from me. Everyone who comes from the surface needs to spend a minimum of a fortnight in quarantine as soon as they alight from the transport. You present your credentials, a tattoo barcode on your inner wrist, and then you move on to the decontamination chamber. It is more tedious than anything else. Once you are given the go-ahead, you exit into a plastic corridor that takes you directly into the quarantine facility. There is no way of escaping this. I do not remember my 14 days of quarantine. They all blur into each other in my mind. I do remember the trip skywards in the second-class transport, how badly the straps adjusted, too big and no one around to help me fix them, and the sudden horizontal ascent, much more shaky than the smooth hovering vehicles I was used to down on Earth, and the smell of sweat and unwashed clothes and fear. We were around 50 people in several rows, closely sat next to one another, no space to move a leg, and having to fight for the hard armrest. They were mostly beanies, probably going up to serve some family or destined for the farming levels. The few techies were distinguishable, mostly because they looked with disdain at the others around them, hoping to make clear that they were made of different stock. But even these techies were heading for minor positions as clerical hands or low-level engineers. These kinds of individuals were always needed up there. I felt sorry for them. They tried very hard to look as if they were used to coming and going between the two places, while obviously trying to hold themselves back from vomiting. I tried to hold myself back as well. I didn't know what had been done to procure the ticket for me. It would be better not to ask. They did not fly easily into your hand, out of nowhere. They were a once-in-a-lifetime affair. I worried somebody had gone short. Someone had lost their life-changing opportunity. A loud crack announced the departure, and for a few minutes, the pressure of my stomach against my throat, holding onto my ill-fitting straps for sheer life, and then shooting up and up we go into the unknown. Our imagined landscape of uncertainties left behind, a gigantic planet with a blotch of green and the uncertain golden and maroon ocean so loved and mourned by Mother. I remember arriving at the receiving station, presenting my tattoo, and being ushered through quickly, as if being a low-level curator has more status up here. Although this only meant that I was transferred to another, faster queue. This queue was to take my temperature, receive a state-of-the-art health scan. I walked into the machine, placed my feet where the signs were, elevated my arms as instructed, and all my secrets were revealed, even to myself. That was all. I had condemned myself to this life pod. And this morning, an emergency in my little white world. A red light flashing somewhere, little rubies of a warning. I panic. The interior of the life pod is ample, but the idea of staying here all day, lying on my back or on my side, cannot be considered for a second. Despite my condition, my episodes, I believe that I have not feared this since I got here. I wonder what this might be. I have not reached a special kind of wisdom or ulale, that moment in which you swim away and the ocean waters and the sky become one and you ascend. No, nothing as impressive as that. The truth is that in recent days, perhaps weeks, I have had no energy for anything, even for worrying. I am simply so tired and in constant pain in any position that nothing else matters. In response to the red lights, the warnings, for the first time the lid over my face does not move. My anxiety starts to spark up. The lid continues to not move, but I should not have worried, for a group of people entered immediately. I have never seen so many, and hovered over the machine, and a circle of unknown eyes behind pristine white face masks. And then it strikes me. She hasn't moved as much recently, has she? It is difficult to estimate. I've not been keeping tabs. Perhaps I should have, no idea. But the truth is, now that I think about it, that the last few weeks she was moving all the time, and now it is difficult to tell. Definitely less. Is that why they are here now? So they press a few buttons, and my life pod starts moving towards the door, and out we go. Where? One white corridor after another white corridor after another white corridor. I stretch my neck as far as it will go. I want to see, I need to see people, places, those strange bioengineered animals Arlo was always talking about, those polished, pristine dressed, brave new people. The little drones that carry things and bring messages and play sweet music to make you forget you are in hell. Nothing. There is a large ward at the end of our short journey. My life pod hovers, and soon I am reaching the white ceiling, push against the white ceiling. I do not understand what is happening, why they have let it go like a balloon. Up and up we go. It comes now, all of a sudden. I can only see the ceiling through the glass lid. Suddenly I cannot breathe. I have to say nothing, communicate nothing. The health issue life pod picks it all up. My heart rate, I guess. My muscles contracting. It descends to floor level. It opens up like a flower. I breathe then, the dear, still, purified air of the upper settlement. Calm down, you have to calm down, someone says. They monitor her movements for 20 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours. I am plucked and prodded, and the monitors are sending a curve up and down madly. She is fine, it is all fine. I doze, finally.
Thank you. I remember reading that bit in the book, and it was so you don't know what's going to happen next. And I felt so anxious for her, because up until that point, she'd kind of been in her element. She'd been in Gabali or Old Town. She kind of knew her world. And then the action kind of shifts to the ring, and it's just white corridor after white corridor. There's no markings. There's no landmarks for her to kind of judge how things are going or anything. So yeah, I remember feeling like
But do you know why I wanted to read this bit? Because recently we had to travel to Spain to do a bit of bureaucracy in Spain, and we were only there for a couple of days. And it struck me when I was reading the novel, figuring out what to read, how similar it was our experience to going through Heathrow. We thought, we had to have all these tests done beforehand. They had to be negative. People were ushered through the quarantine facilities if they have gone through traveled through red dot countries, through a different corridor. And it's very similar to some of the things here. I don't know. It's certainly worrying, basically, like I say, how some things and some images that I imagined 2-3 years ago, and I'm now, even only that little time later, I'm connecting to in my real experience.
Yeah, no, it also struck me as well that although it's a really scary and alien time for Pearl, it's kind of recognizable for us, the sort of the immigrations or arrivals area of going through these constant, very clinical places. So thank you. Lovely. So we're officially in overtime, so I'm going to call this the cutting room, which leads into Helen's question. So Helen Marshall was another one of your mentors, and her question, which I think is a good one to end on because it's has potential for lots of fun, was, what was your favorite bit of weird research that didn't make it into the novel?
Wow.
What's the outtakes? This is the outtakes part of the show.
Well, I have to say, I had a teacher of a credit writing little course that I went on a summer in Spain when I was very small. My parents let me go. And she gave us a piece of advice, which was basically never throw anything away. And it's the best piece of advice ever. So I think my favorite thing that I was researching for this novel and then make it into a novel was that at the time, when I started thinking about the world, and I didn't know exactly when the novel was going to start. So maybe I was going to have to show the event, the Green Winter event or not, etc. I did a bit of research about bunkers. And I became quite obsessed with bunkers, and I'm not talking in particular about the underground amazing facilities that rich people are building all over Chelsea and Hampstead, although they're onto something, let me tell you. But about the bunker communities in America, in particular. There's loads of, I mean, there you have all sorts of sizes. You can have really, really expensive or multimillionaire Bond villain HQ type of places where you go
with
down.
a pool.
Yes. and you have, windows that change the weather as if you were outside and so on. And also you have communities where people have cheaper things that they just put together themselves or save money together, crowdfund to do. And it's super, super interesting. But I realized that I couldn't really start the novel with people coming out of a bunker, although there is one of the fairy tales, well, modern fairy tales are like stories passed on orally, that they are embedded throughout the novel, which sort of explain how they are explaining their myths to themselves. It's about three sisters who come out of an underground into the new world, as it were. Yeah, but bunkers are fascinating. I don't know if I've got lots of time to go into them. But for a fleeting moment, I really wanted a bunker. And my husband was like, no, we're not going to get a bunker. But it made lots of sense to me at some point of hate and research.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. You can just stockpile sangria in the bunker.
Yes, and just have some musical thing going on. And no, but I'm definitely, it's sort of seeping into my new collection of short stories, and it's seeping also into my new novel, which is something I didn't expect at all, that one of the characters was going to be a person who had been brought up, because it's the near future, and she comes from America to the UK, and she's been brought up in one of these bunker communities. And I didn't expect that to happen at all.
Well, isn't that funny then? It's like that, never throw anything away, because if you don't use it for your current thing, it'll end up in the next one.
Yes. But it's just such a fascinating topic that I have to write about it, and I like to get into the mindset of these people and why they do it. And in a way, I am a bit of a prepper, because I learned doing the research that you're a bit of a prepper if you keep, for example, tins of food. And before the Brexit transition period, at some point, we decided to do a big shop of goods. So.
Is that where all of the goods went last year? To your bunker.
If you're after any tomato soup from Heinz, it's all in my house. I'm really sorry. We're gonna be eating that until the end of the world, literally, basically.
I think it is that it's a really human thing, isn't it, to just like to borrow and to stockpile, like just hoard.
and grow our vegetables and learn to survival skills. I really wanted my son to go to the scouts, for example. I'm so upset that because of the pandemic, the scouts are because he needs to learn these things. Sorry, I do sound a bit mad now, don't I?
No, that's fine. But I was just thinking as well, like the whole bunker thing where like, you have this feeling like you need to go into a bunker and like store loads of food. Do you think that comes from like, we've never really had to survive on that level? We've had mod cons, everything's kind of been at the touch of our fingertips. So when it comes to, you have to survive now, people just panic and just go overboard.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. We don't have the experience of a war or anything like that. The real interesting thing that I found out doing this research is that in mainland Europe, after the Second World War, lots of countries decided that it was their duty to have bunker spaces for all the citizens. And countries like Sweden have millions of bunker spaces, one for each citizen. And as soon as early as, as close by as 2018, they all got a leaflet actually in the post reminding them where their bunker place was, which is super interesting. And what happened in America is that the government decided to say to the public that it was their responsibility. And there was even a very famous speech by JFK in 1962, I think, in which he actually said to the Americans, you have to go to your backyard and build something because of nuclear war. So that's why there's so many and there's so much ingrained into the culture, you see. Yeah. I find it fascinating and I think it is a good idea to be prepared. But obviously all that came out of the Second World War as well and the Cold War later on. And we still haven't really had, well, I don't know, maybe COVID. COVID has been quite traumatic. We're still processing how traumatic the past year has been. But I'm sure there's going to be a shift in our thinking. There must be a shift in our thinking, certainly in as much as climate change and the environment. I mean, we can't just all go back to the same thing, to the commuting and...
Yeah. And yeah, the hoarding of resources, which was obviously a huge problem as well. So in about a couple of years' time, when your next collection or your next novel comes out, I'm expecting to have some kind of bunker book launch.
That'd be great. Maybe I can send to bloggers a copy of the book with a bag-out bag, which is a 72 hours bag you have to have ready.
Yes.
So neat. Wow. Or a tin of tomato soup.
Well, we're running over by about 10 minutes. So I think it's best if we start to sign off and let people go on with their evening.
Okay.
If they'd like to. Thank you so much, Marian, for joining us to help launch your book.
Thank you, Gemma. Thank you to everybody who sent questions and to all of you who came. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was lovely to do this.
A very quick thank you to Anne for being our stage.
And to Anne, to Ximera, please, yes.
Thank you very much quickly to Aaliyah, to Kathleen, to Helen and to Una for giving us some questions to help the discussion along. And thank you to Anne and Jill here in the chat for giving us questions as well. We really hope you've had a good evening.